Okay, so to some people, there's a belief that IAS or being a part of the civil service may give you an opportunity to change things within the government. So why is it you perhaps decided after 10 years of being in the civil service that changing things wasn't from the inside was perhaps not possible and going into politics was the better answer?
My 10 years in civil services gave me important insights into how things work in our part of the world. We are not living in the United States. I've been there, studied there, but the kind of institutions which European countries or maybe America has, those institutions have matured over a period of time. Politics is not the last refuge of the scoundrel. But when it comes to our place here, politics is something very few people prefer. People prefer to be in medicine, then they want to be engineers, somebody wants to be in civil services, some people want to then go and join academia. Politics is the last thing which educated class prefers. So when I was in civil services, I understood that it's finally the politics which the scope of impact by being in politics is immense. The impact on policy that the politician has is far greater than a civil servant can even imagine. At the same time, it's finally, because we are living in a democracy, it will be the politician who will determine the future of the future of the societies, the nature of the policies, what kind of education we are going to give, what kind of health we are going to promote in the society. It's finally the politics. So I realized that maybe now this experience of 10 years I can carry with myself and maybe go to the next level.
Do you feel though, however, having been a part of the civil service, working for the Indian government, you may be able to bridge that gap that perhaps is in the lack of communication, right? Or the misconceptions that Delhi and both Kashmir, both sides have towards the other respective
Honestly
party?
speaking, when I was in civil services, I would feel that a civil servant is some sort of a buffer between the politician and the people. Had there been no civil servants, then politicians will loot all the wealth away, politicians will oppress the common people. But now that I'm away, I'm out, and I'm looking at things from this side of the fence, now I'm feeling that no, politician is important. Had politician not been there, then this entire bureaucratic machinery would have been extremely oppressive. They would have denied all the rights of the people. So I think now, as part of the grassroots politics, what I'm doing is that I'm trying to build a bridge between the state and the people, and we are feeling that we can possibly improve that communication, the communication that you're talking about. That the problem with the conflict zone is that larger masses they're alienated from the institutions of the state. They don't have trust on them. So while I am trying to revive democratic politics here in the state, my idea is that maybe I can bridge the gap.
Okay, so some of the rumors in the valley after you quit IAS and were getting into politics was that you were going to join the national conference and even perhaps be for one of the MP seats, if I'm correct, right? Which you most likely would have won given the occurrences. So what changed and was perhaps the impetus for you to form your own political party rather than join something that would have perhaps guaranteed more success in the short run?
I did really want to join an existing political party. It gave me a lot of comfort to immediately, maybe I would have been in the parliament and I would have started my work. Didn't need much of hard work the way it needs to build a separate party. But then soon after I had to take this decision, I think there was a huge outrage across the state. Even my friends in other parts of the country and abroad as well, they gave me feedback that if you take this decision of endorsing the existing political parties, then what is the purpose of joining politics? If you cannot bring some change, if you cannot provide an alternative to people, then it makes absolutely no sense. You go and stay in the civil services the way you were. So I think that's where I realized that maybe I need to make a little bit of more sacrifice. I need to take a harder decision. That this is a shortcut. I could be immediately in the parliament, but let me take the longer route. So I was literally forced. My hand was held by the youngsters of this state, and I was forced to make a new party.
So, I guess from that perspective, an implied, question that perhaps you as a party, or probably by creating a party, you've already answered, is there a time now for these PDP and NC, these old parties, to now step aside, right, and perhaps reinvent themselves, right? Because perhaps while they were crucial to Kashmir's history, do you believe that there is a requirement for them to step away now?
Yeah, problem with dynasty politics is that it becomes complacent after some time. So when you have the baton of power being passed from one generation to another generation, then people have a sense of entitlement. They feel, oh, it's not important to bring development, it's not important to provide solutions to people, we will get elected anyway. These are your 6 years and next turn is mine, these next 6 years are going to be mine. So I think that's basically a problem in the state now, that these political dynasties have been taking turns for the last 70 years. We have been saying that it's now a turn for some sort of an organic, spontaneous, natural politics to happen here, where the youth of the state are the primary stakeholders, where good governance is very important, and a politics which sort of learns from the mistakes which these existing political parties have made.
So it seems to be a lot of the drive for you to go into politics was younger people, right? And so I spent some time in Kashmir, going to the Kashmir University, right? Which is obviously very much separatist, right? But a question, I guess, to you is that many, at least young people, seem to not want to vote in elections because they feel this is a system that's been placed on them without their choice. How do you convince those people to come into the democratic fold? Is it the central government, or is there steps you can take as a party to convince them to once again vote in the democracy already in place?
We have seen, if you recall, we have seen unprecedented level of boycott in last parliamentary elections, and we saw very, very low voter turnouts.
Yeah.
And when I asked this question to the youngsters, that why don't you vote? One, they tell us that voting is like endorsement of the status quo. It's like, because there's a problem here, there's a conflict, when we vote, then the state understands that, oh, you don't need to do anything. Now these people have already voted, so they have given their consent. But then they tell me, then if there were alternatives, maybe if there were better people, better candidates, better ideologies, then maybe youth would come out to vote. So we are telling them that, look, these people who have been here for the last 70 years, we have lost a lot. We have lost around 120,000 lives in this state. Millions of homes were destroyed. Hundreds and thousands of Kashmiri Pandits were dislocated from this place. They lost their homes. So our onus is on now us to bring change. And the only way to bring change is by democratic politics, by adopting the democratic method. And I think youth, somehow this idea is resonating with them.
So I guess my question is, when joining creating your own party, the idea is you need to have your own ideology, correct? But more or less PDP, NC, even your party are fighting for the preservation of Article 35A and 370 and the return of autonomy to its pre-1953 levels. So when my observation is there's very little difference between PDP and NC at its core ideology. So perhaps, why do you think forming your own party, or what makes your ideology stand out more than just perhaps that you feel you're a new face?
One, we are saying that there are three elements to the vision that we are promoting. One is that when it comes to the political ideology side of it, we are saying that we need to protect what is with us. We need to restore what has been snatched from us, and we need to retrieve our rights or what we deserve. So the first element would be 35A, 370 delimitation, all this entire bracket of things, which is that these things are some things which cannot be snatched from us. We need to preserve these things. We need to protect the special constitutional status. Second thing is that we are talking that this political party emerges out of a sense of sacrifice. We are not here to get government jobs, or we are not here to get, run for just to run for offices, or to make money, or to make fortunes. We have quit something, and most of the people in this political party have given sacrifices in their lives. Somebody has left their job, somebody has left their business, somebody has left other political parties and he is coming here. The idea of sacrifice is building up, and we are telling people that we are here, genuine people, we want to bring something new. We have seen a lot of bad things happening to this place in the last 70 years. So here are we people, and we are trying to, contribute something for the society, and good governance and corruption-free administration and transparency and accountability and sustainable development. I think these are ideas which have been talked about by other political parties, but these are the central and the core themes of our political ideology.
So perhaps to you, this election is just simply a first step to a much longer change that you want to bring to Kashmir.
Absolutely. I think the idea of politics is ultimately to bring social change. The idea of leadership is to give hope to people when there is no hope. Had we, been after political or public offices, then one, we may not have even quit. And second, other political parties were already there where we could have joined and then got those political offices. The idea here is to go for a longer, sustained struggle by which we can enforce political rights, provide good governance, protect nature, and do something about issues like climate change, about gender rights, about children's rights, about women's rights, about rights of the disabled people, about all other people who are like marginalized and who are living on the fringe.
You don't have to get going anywhere, right?
No.
Oh, okay. Thank God. So I guess that's, I think, having talked about Article 370 and 35, I think that's an interesting segue towards, I guess, the bigger grasp of what this interview and my research was about is the history. So I guess from your opinion, what were the missteps that brought us to this point, right? Because Gandhi once referred to Kashmir as a ray of hope. So in your opinion, what were the historical missteps and who or what should be held responsible for how we got here? And I guess the second underlying question is, how does one characterize this problem? Is it an economic, political, or religious issue?
If you remember how partition happened, the very idea of partition was a religious partition. So states were created around the ideas of religion. And now, one interesting thing happens that after the Indian Independence Act is passed, and the princely states, Jammu and Kashmir state was a princely state. So the princely states, they become free, they become sovereign entities. And then you have two dominions, Dominion of India and the Dominion of Pakistan. And then these princely states are given a choice that, okay, you can join the Dominion of India or Dominion of Pakistan. And there are certain principles laid down for that decision to be taken. Now imagine, I think in last 2000 years of mankind's history, it may be for the first time, that a Muslim majority sovereign state, recall that it was a sovereign state at the time of 1947, a Muslim majority sovereign state willingly accedes under certain conditions to a non-Muslim dominion. And the founding fathers, of which Sheikh Mohammed Abdullah was the most prominent name, this person, rather than siding with a state which declared itself to be openly theocratic state or an Islamic state, it decides to go with a dominion or a state which declares itself to be a secular, democratic republic. What an amazing arrangement, what an exception. And soon after 1947, in 1953, this person, the same person who facilitated this arrangement, he is put behind the bars for 22 years. And during these 22 years, those conditions which had to be put in the accession, vis-a-vis Article 370 particularly, those conditions are gradually diluted. You have no one less than the Prime Minister of India speaking on the floor of the Parliament. And he says in 1963 that Article 370 is just a shell. We have almost eroded it so much that it doesn't make any sense to us now, and we have almost fully integrated the state of Jammu and Kashmir. So there was a willful erosion and denial of those promises. The same Jawaharlal Nehru tells the people of Jammu and Kashmir and while addressing the United Nations, that we are going to determine the final future of this state by referring it to the people of the state. So there is this sort of, what has happened over a period of last 70 years, that there has been a lot of double speak on Kashmir. On one side, people have been saying that we want to restore, we want to respect what has been given to you in the nature of Article 370. Accession has been conditional. This is a very unique arrangement, but at the same time, there has been constant attempts to disempower people, to take away their autonomy, to dilute their political rights. That process is now being completed by BJP, but I do not see much difference the way Congress has been handling Kashmir in the last 70 years and then what BJP is doing now.
So I guess the question then, the secondary question is that when you talk to BJP people, they tend to portray this as an economic issue at its heart. And at the same time, media in Delhi, which is one of the reasons I wanted to come here, tries to say that, oh, look at all these terrorist threats, therefore painting this as a religious issue. So it seems to be your point is that this is a political issue at its heart. So then I guess how do we explain the religious dimension that is there, and that is inherent in the conflict? Was there underlying religious issue that the political problem brought out and emphasized, or is this something else altogether?
I think it also depends on from which angle are you looking at this problem. This is a very complex problem, but as you very rightly said, that fundamentally and at the core of it is the political issue which emerged out of a faulty partition or events around the partition which happened. Now, what is it now? The irony here is that the majority of the stakeholders around this dispute are Muslims. So it's a natural feeling that the representation of the dispute becomes religious. And religion does have a very important intervention in the collective life of the people. More so when it comes to people like Kashmiris, whose cultural life is dominated by their religious symbols, by their religious representation, by their religious language and the idiom. So it becomes very easy to paint a political issue as a religious issue. Very easy to do that. When you look at Kashmiris, if you compare an ordinary Kashmiri with somebody from the mainland India, or go to other parts of the world and you see Muslims there, you will see the Kashmiri brand of Islam is one of the most moderate brands of Islam. And not just brands of Islam, but the practice of Islam is very moderate. It's very inclusive. The culture is syncretic. Kashmiri Pandits have been here, and there are a lot of, there's a lot of convergence between Kashmiri Pandit culture and the Kashmiri Muslim culture. If you cannot even tell apart between these two, you cannot tell apart between a Kashmiri Muslim and a Kashmiri Pandit. So I think because of intensification of the conflict, maybe radicalization, maybe one of the pitfalls of that constant exposure to violence, that people do swing towards extreme ideologies when conflict protracts and conflict prolongs. But then I will maintain that fundamentally the orientation of this dispute is it's a political issue.
But then the beginning of the conflict perhaps has its seeds in the early 80s, that if the leaders in charge like Farooq Abdullah and the Indian government had taken things seriously, this would have been prevented. But when things really start as 89. How does then one explain, are you explaining the expulsion of Pandits, the result of a political conflict that forced some to, that may have pushed some to radicalize and look towards extremism, or perhaps were that Pandits were just used as a symbol for the Hindu state, a way to express their anger and frustration?
I feel, there have been multiple reasons why Kashmiri Pandits had to leave their homeland. And my understanding is that when the conflict got intensified in early 90s here in Kashmir, there was an immense sense of security. And this sense of insecurity was both in the majority population and the minority population. And when it comes to minority ethnic populations which have a separate culture and which feel they will be politically dominated and which feel that there will be a rise of majoritarianism in this place, I think we have seen similar things happening, similar displacements happening to minorities elsewhere in the world also. So I see it somewhere because it was not necessarily out of religious frenzy that these people got chased away from this place, but I think it was more because of a sense of insecurity, intense insecurity, because around the same time a lot of Kashmiri Muslims also migrated. There was a huge level of internal displacement of Kashmiri Muslims from rural areas to urban areas, from those areas where there was high militancy to those areas where there was low militancy. So I think it had more to do with the security of the place than the religious things which were happening around.
So, but I guess with that question is that at least some historians based out of India and Delhi sort of contend that there was a bridge between the Pandits and the Muslims. And they blamed Dogra rule for setting that. There was the Muslim conference, and even though they were fighting against land rights, they also did argue that Brahmins had been receiving benefits from Dogra rulers. So, to what extent can Dogra rulers be held responsible for sowing the seeds of discontent under their rule?
If you recall, what has been happening in the last 70 years is that, when the Dogra rule, Kashmir was more like a subject province. It was a subject state. It was an extractory regime, it was not a democracy at all. It was an autarky. You had one person and you had a dynasty which had been ruling the state for not many years. And Kashmiri Pandits, the average educational qualification of Kashmiri Pandits was higher than the Kashmiri Muslims. And most of the officers and the officials in the Dogra administration, they were Kashmiri Pandits. Kashmiri Muslims had a very less representation in the offices of the Dogra regime.
Didn't that also occur, however, in rulers past? Correct, that this wasn't simply like Pandits had usually been more educated and been in office positions before.
Because Pandits also were less in number, and Pandits had this aptitude for studying, and state was also facilitatory of the Kashmiri Pandits, because Kashmiri Pandits were they were very close to the state. So Kashmiri Pandits were always acting as if they were partisans of the state. So I do not think Dogra rulers could have deliberately done it, but my belief is that by default it happened that Kashmiri Pandits automatically took a position which was a position of the state, and because the state was an oppressive state, it was an extractory state. So automatically the wedge between the Kashmiri Pandits and the Muslims, it widened. Most of the Harkaras and the Sazawals and the people, the tax people, the revenue collectors, they were Kashmiri Pandits. So the relationship between average Kashmiri Pandit and the average Kashmiri Muslim was more of a subject, more of the master and an agent relationship.
So perhaps there was a disconnection forged. And could that perhaps mean that the Pandits also became a symbol for a government that then may be considered oppressive, at least to the Muslims?
It did. I think Kashmiri Pandits, by default, by nature of the position that they took, if you talk about, I mean, this is not something which is recorded in history, but I think if you talk to people from the earlier generations, most of them will tell you that Kashmiri Pandits, I mean, those people were usually part of the official machinery, and they were very, very harsh towards Kashmiri Muslims. And some people will also tell you that these rivalries then finally played out even during the exodus also, so as if one community got an opportunity to take a revenge, which is a very unfortunate way of saying it, that okay, you have been doing this to us till now, so we'll get back to you now.
So it carried on, so that...
And this thing has been carried
on. So perhaps the political conflict brought this out almost, right? That it was at its core, it was a political conflict.
It is possible. So my point is that it's very hard to delineate the exact reasons of the Kashmiri Pandit exodus. It's good that Kashmiri Pandits are narrating their own stories, and Kashmiri Muslims are also talking about exodus these days. But it is that my memory as a child is that the situation was so bad those days that everybody wanted to flee Kashmir.
Okay, so I guess moving more, actually continuing a bit on the past, right? So you had referred a bit about the terms for accession, right? So there is a belief in this party that the accession should be binding in all its forms, correct? That there is no debate about whether whether Kashmir should accede to India. That is fully legal, correct?
So what we are saying is that it's not us, it's the BJP, in fact, which is reopening the debate around the accession. So we have been constantly saying that the issue is not only about Delhi and Srinagar, the issue is also about other parts of the state. The part of state with the Pakistan, the Pak-administered Kashmir, India says that this is also our part. They have their own aspirations. When they go to the United Nations, or when these two countries go to talk to each other, and then they talk about all the Kashmir, they talk about Gilgit-Baltistan, they talk about Muzaffarabad, they talk about Jammu and Kashmir and this side of the world. So we are saying that if you look at accession as being solution to the problem, that you are not looking at the other parts of the Kashmir. You are not looking at the dimension that Pakistan has also been raising this issue for the last 70 years. So we are saying maybe it's part of the solution, but you need to have a solution which is like an overarching solution which can include parts which are not necessarily with India this time, or which can also help in bringing peace to the entire subcontinent.
Okay, so moving more towards the modern day, you had talked about your party's attempt to protect gender rights. So does that perhaps also say that Article 35A then does need a sort of reformation because of the issue of domicile, right? That only the man can pass domicile. For example, I become a state subject, but if a woman here marries outside for some reason their children, even though I haven't lived in Kashmir for the last 2-3 generations.
If you look at how the gender rights or how the property rights operate in this state, it's not just the constitution. Finally, constitution is operated by means of laws and ordinances and guidelines and rules. So what has been happening here is that the High Court of the state has already given judgments that you cannot deprive the women of this place from their rightful property. Even their children cannot be deprived of their property. So I think the law is very clear, but yes, maybe those guidelines, those laws need to be now incorporated and assembled. But I mean, revoking Article 35 is not the way to do that. Article 35 is something which is like a covenant. It's a pact between the Union of India and the state of Jammu and Kashmir. And if you look at the history, then once the Constituent Assembly got dissolved in 1957, then entire debate around Article 35A and then 370 got closed. My belief and our party's belief, and I think the belief of so many jurists is that the road to any adventure with Article 35A has closed after the Constituent Assembly got dissolved in 1957, because the Constituent Assembly, as per the language of the article, was the only competent authority that could have altered it.
So, I guess I would like to understand. So I understand a bit by Article 370.
We will have to be fast. We will have a lot of people inside.
Okay, so then I'll go on from that. Is there a divide between Jammu, Kashmir and Ladakh? And if so, how can that be bridged?
There is. and these three regions have been behaving like three states in recent times. And I mean, the political forces also have been trying their best to maybe escalate the fault lines between these three regions. It's a miracle that during times of Maharaja, this state was one state, and Maharaja was able to hold these three regions together. Even till recent times, we did not have any regional, regional biases or some sort of regional sense of injustice that, oh, we people are getting discriminated. We people are getting discriminated. These people are politically overpowering us. These people are politically overpowering us. I think these arguments are very recent arguments, which are devised just to bring division between the people and to do politics. We still believe that the cultural, the political, the economic, the political, the cultural, the economic, the job, the climate, all interests of the people of three regions there are convergence between these three interests. And if we want, people of Jammu, people of Ladakh, people of Kashmir, they can work together and create a mutually shared, a joint progressive future for them.
So you have time, I just have two more questions. Yes. So there's been a lot of discussion in the news, right, about the abrogation of Article 35A. So I was hoping to get a bit about your perspective on that, and perhaps what you believe are the reasons behind them doing it. Is there a political motive, and also what would be the repercussions if done so?
Article 35A, the reason this time which is being given for removing the Article 35A, mainly, number one, that it is an obstacle to gender parity in the state. Second reason, it hurts investment in the state. Third, it creates a class of people called the state subjects, and it's discriminating with the rest of the people from the rest of the country. Now, if you look at the first argument that there is no gender parity, we are saying that this is not, the gender parity here cannot be only brought about by revoking the Article 35A. It has to be done legislatively, and laws are already there in the state which give equal rights to women, and there's absolutely no need to tinker with Article 35A. Then they are saying that, but the investment is not coming. We are saying, yeah, 35A may be a problem for this state. What about other states? Why is Bihar poor? Why is Chhattisgarh poor? Why are Punjab? Why other country? Andhra Pradesh. What about Madhya Pradesh? Why don't you do something for the Northeast? You don't have similar provisions there. Let's first do the investment there. So we are saying that this is a very spurious correlation between the lack of investment and employment opportunities and Article 35A. Then they are saying that no, but then it has not allowing us to integrate the state. We are saying that integration doesn't happen by revoking articles from the Constitution. Integration is a state of mind. It happens when you win the hearts and minds of people. It happens when you relate to the sentiment, when you own a certain class of people. It doesn't happen by alienating them. If integration was a problem, then you would not have been lynching so many people, so many Muslims in the other parts of the country. So our understanding is that the very fundamental push for revocation of 35A is there because the right wing wants to bring about demographic change. It wants to assault the unique cultural identity of this place. It wants to disempower the majority population of this place, and there are absolutely no bones about it.
So my final question is, how do you see the issue changing in the coming years in the way it's manifested itself in the Valley and perhaps in Jammu and Ladakh? And what do you believe and your party believe is the steps necessary to solve it?
My point here is that we have experimented for the last 70 years, and we have seen the levels of alienation after eroding Article 370 and Article 35A. My belief is that if you keep on eroding these articles further, if you keep on denying the political rights to the people, situation here is not going to improve any further. It's going to deteriorate. You do not conquer people. You win them over. You win their hearts and minds. That's the only way to assimilate. That's the only way to integrate. And why do you want to assimilate in the first place? India is a federation. It's a federation of ideas. It's a federation of cultures. It may be have unitary bias, but it's a federal, in nature, a federal polity in nature. Why don't you preserve diversity? Why don't you give opportunities for people to have their cultures and their languages and their polities, and then still be a loose, be together while preserving their special identity? So my belief is that, one, if these assaults continue, and if India keeps on receding on this path of becoming a Hindu Rashtra, and if India keeps on giving up its ideals of secularism and ideals on which the freedom struggle was fought, then the situation between India and Jammu and Kashmir is going to be very, very bad in coming years, and the levels of alienation are going to rise. We are going to see an intensification of the conflict in this region. India, the kind of relationship which Delhi has with Srinagar at this time, my apprehension is that one, that relationship will deteriorate, and the relationship between these three regions also is going to deteriorate. Unfortunately, if these steps are not reversed, then it may be too late for us to do anything about it.